I'll never forget Christmas of 1997. My family, like many others, always allowed the kids to open up one present on Christmas Eve, with the rest of it waiting for us the next morning. And what did I lay eyes upon when I opened up that early gift? Final Fantasy VII. I was so excited to play it that I found myself unable to sleep for the remainder of the night. We only had one PlayStation at the time and it was placed inside the living room, so I couldn't exactly play it just yet. This led me to splurge on VHS tapes like Nothing to Lose and Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery Until the Sun Rose. And when it finally came time to open up the remaining gifts, I received a boost of adrenaline when I received Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. That was a damn good Christmas vacation.
You know that feeling you got when you were a kid and you got exactly what you asked for Christmas? Marvelous. Well, Crash Bandicoot 2. Released only a year after the original, but I don't think that has so much of a stigma then as it does today because of the limited technology at the time. Nevertheless, let's go back and boot it up and see what Dr. Neo Cortex has in store for our Orange Bandicoot.
I don't think highly of the first Crash Bandicoot game now, but as I stated in the early review, there was nothing else I played when I first got the game in '96. With the new Underground sampler disc coming in the mail sometime later, I was pumped to see the upcoming sequel included in the section of playable demos. I distinctly remember it being the first winter level, Snow Goat, and the updated look of the game was just absolute eye candy for me at the time. Let's start things off with the plot though. Immediately after his defeat in the last game, Cortex survives his plummet toward the Wampa Islands and discovers a new power source for his space station, crystals. 1 year later, a new assistant of Cortex known as Engine informs the Doctor that just one crystal isn't enough to power the station fully, and that 25 other crystals will need to be collected to reach maximum output. Because Cortex has no other operatives left, he hatches a plan to use his arch-rival Crash Bandicoot to collect the crystals for him, disguising his true purpose by claiming that he needs the crystals in order to prevent a terrible catastrophe from destroying the planet. Just why in the hell is Crash Bandicoot so gullible to help out Cortex to begin with? Well, because Crash is dumb, no ifs, ands, or buts. The plot wastes no time in telling the player that Cortex is really evil. Hell, the subtitle of the game is Cortex Strikes Back. Crash's sister, Coco, attempts to warn our hero at sporadic points of the game, but we all know what's really going on, so Coco's warnings come off as a bit redundant to the player. The story isn't much bigger than the last game, but the production values were most unquestionably given a boost, and the dialogue is still making me chuckle after so many years of playing this game. It also helps that Clancy Brown is now the voice of Neo Cortex. I love this man as Lex Luthor in the DC animated universe, and I love him here as Neo Cortex. Unfortunately for our beloved Bandicoot, collecting crystals is the name of the game here. Levels are now broken up into tiers, and entering a level is just as easy as walking into the stage's portal, and there you go. In order to complete the current row of levels and access the next section of stages, you gotta collect each crystal in the corresponding level and beat the boss on the way up to the next tier. You really can't miss crystals during your journey through the level. They're placed in locations where you have to be practically blind in order to miss them. Since the last game, Crash's control has been tweaked in all the right places. He doesn't feel as heavy as he did earlier, which includes his jumping ability, and the minor traction issue I had with him before is no longer there. Crash Bandicoot 2 is the first to incorporate analog control in later revisions of the game. The digital release on the PlayStation Network store doesn't have analog control, and I may never understand why, but I'll state once again that using the D-pad isn't all that bad. With level design like this, I feel you kinda don't need it honestly. Crash is packing a few new moves to help him deal with crystal collecting, and the best one among them is the slide. It's mainly used to travel through tight spaces, but you can also use it to take care of certain enemies that you can't jump or spin on. Jumping immediately after performing a slide lets you do the slide jump, which is one of my favorite things to do in this game. You not only jump higher than a normal jump, but you also jump farther, so with good timing, you can take some platforming shortcuts to bypass dangerous obstacles. Crash can also do a super jump by holding down the circle button and then pressing the jump button, but I feel you only need to use this to reach that one hard to reach box. A slide jump is usually good enough for me. If you press the circle button in midair, Crash will do a belly flop, which you'll probably only use as a means to break open these new steel crates. I'm not too big on the belly flop, or steel crates for that matter, because I feel they just serve to disrupt the pace of the level. If I'm gonna attack enemies, I'm using the spin, the slide, or just a normal jump. Steel boxes aren't the only new things in town. Crash 2 brings us the highly unstable nitro boxes. Just one touch, and you'll be singing that didgeridoo in the sky in no time. If you can find the green exclamation box, you can wipe out every nitro box in the stage to reduce the risk of further bodily harm. You also need to do that if you plan on getting the returning box gems. Ooh boy, gems are back with a vengeance. There are 42 of them to collect this time, and collecting them are once again this game's biggest source of difficulty. That's generally how it works with every Crash game, folks. If you just want to collect every crystal and not give any of the gems a second thought, then you'll find that Crash Bandicoot 2 is a pretty safe adventure. You'll rack up the lives in no time, and you won't have to deal with the added challenge factor of going for 100%. Crash is going to have to endure a number of things to succeed, like the returning chase levels and animal riding levels, only this time with a cute little polar bear, but areas like Hang 8, among other levels, will require Crash to ride a jetboard on water to jump across ramps, mines, and whirlpools. Crash will even need to utilize a jetpack to navigate through the lack of gravity in Cortex's space station, and it controls like shit. If the jetpack stages were auto-scrolling levels where you only needed to worry about Crash's positioning, then I don't think it'd be so much of an issue because controlling Crash would be kinda like controlling an R-Wing in the Star Fox games. But since we have manual control over Crash's forward and backward movements, precise positioning is a near impossibility. A substantial amount of the gems are acquired by breaking all the boxes in the stage like last time, but the methods of getting every single gem has gotten a bit more intricate since the previous game. When you're in the warp room, you can see just what exactly you can obtain by the indentations next to the level's name, and as you can see, besides the crystal, certain levels have more than one gem to collect. Firstly, and most importantly, getting a box gem is considerably less aggravating since the first game in terms of how box tallying works. And by that I mean the checkpoint boxes actually say the number of boxes you collected before breaking the box. Also, a detail I failed to mention in the previous review was that back in the first game, after you broke your first checkpoint box, you couldn't afford to lose a life at all after doing so, because even if you backtracked to break the boxes that were no longer broken, you would immediately warp back to the world map screen, completely skipping the gem collection sequence. So you pretty much couldn't afford to die at all after getting the first checkpoint while trying to get the stage's gem.
Thank you for reminding me of that bullshit, Catacris. And I greatly appreciate you watching my videos, dude. Thanks.
Mercifully, you can die as many times as you want this time around, and since checkpoints save the boxes this time, you only have to worry about moving forward, assuming you broke everything to begin with, because the end of the stage will not hesitate to remind you of how many boxes you missed. Every once in a while, your eyes may catch this transparent panel. Certain stages have what are known as death routes. If you can reach this panel without dying before doing so, it'll become a platform that you can hitch a ride on, where you can either find more boxes to complete the total for the level's box gem, or a completely different hidden gem you can nab after completing the optional course. And if it isn't locating hidden pathways via death routes, it's gem platforms that require you to have the necessary colored gem to ride on. Some gems, on the other hand, have completely different ways of achieving, and you're not going to know how to get some of these without a guide or repeated playthroughs. The blue gem in the first level, for instance, requires that you finish the stage without breaking any boxes at all, but as far as I'm aware, nothing about the game tells you about that. If I didn't have that mini guide from Electronic Gaming Monthly back in '97, who knows how long it would have taken me to get that one. No matter how hard you look, there might be some stages where the box tally at the end will tell you that you missed a rather large chunk of boxes. Totally finishing these stages require locating secret areas hidden within the stage, or warp points in other levels that take you to a new area in the previously explored level. Some are pretty obvious to find if you have an eye for that sort of thing, and some require ignoring common sense, like falling down a supposed bottomless pit. Since you don't have to worry about dying when it comes to getting the gems, I guess Naughty Dog decided to make the very idea of locating the gem itself the real challenge. Crash 2 undoubtedly made its fair share of improvements. The level design is more fleshed out and fun to explore, the control is great, the graphics are wonderful for a PS1 game, and the added cartoony nature of things like enemy design and animations really makes the world come alive. The soundtrack is also an especially great listen, and perhaps the greatest change of all, you can save your game just by walking up to this window in the warp room and boom, there you go, saved progress. No more need for Tawna emblems. Sadly, Crash 2 didn't really improve on the whole backtracking aspect when you're collecting boxes. Now that I think about it, it's worse here. The fixed camera still doesn't turn around when you're going backwards in a 3D area, and compared to Crash 1, you're going to be doing it more often here. It's just the way some of these stages are designed, like Digging It in Warp Room 4, which has a fork in the road, both of which contain boxes to break for the box gem. It also has a hidden gem located in the death route, so you can't afford to die before reaching it. There's bees that are sorta hard to anticipate when you can't see them coming, and bottomless pits up the wazoo. Pisting it away requires that you bypass the death route platform in order to get this one box further down the level, and then backtrack to the death route platform to nab the boxes in that pathway. And you need to do it in that specific order or else you're going to be missing a hell of a lot of boxes if you decide to take the normal route. The supreme king of this pain-in-the-ass design is Cold Hard Crash, another level located inside the fourth warp room. It has a shitload of boxes to break, one of which is hidden atop this one box in the bonus room, which will no doubt cause you to fucking flip out when it turns out to be the only box you're missing at the end of this hellhole. And the death route requires you to go forward and back along this very dangerous pathway with ice physics, nitro boxes, and a bunch of other shit that'll make your hands sweat. It also has boxes to break, so you have to go through here if you want the box gem. It also has a hidden gem located at the very end of the pathway, but if you grab it too soon, you won't be able to backtrack to grab not only the new boxes that appear when you struck the exclamation box at the end of the path, but you also won't be able to ride the death route platform back down to the normal route, where more boxes await to be broken. Without a doubt in my mind, this is the worst level in the PlayStation 1 Crash Bandicoot series. But please keep in mind, while the examples I mentioned are without hesitation painful to deal with, nothing else in this game, regardless if you're going for all the collectibles or just the crystals themselves, comes close to matching the frustration of how these levels are designed when going for the 100% mark. Crash Bandicoot 2 improves everything in almost, I repeat, almost every way possible over the first game. If Crash Bandicoot 1 didn't convince you, I'm certain you'll find something to really enjoy with the second game. Its plot is small, it's not a very long game at all, beatable in just a few hours, but there's a greater amount of detail and focus in this game than the first one by a long shot. The first few levels in the game do such a magnificent job in teaching you how the mechanics of Crash Bandicoot 2 works. From controls to how certain boxes work, there's nowhere to go but up when you defeat the first boss. This game was what made me a hardcore Crash Bandicoot fan in the late 90s, and I was eagerly anticipating the next game in the lineup. There was no other platform game I was looking forward to than Crash Bandicoot 3. But that's for the next video. So allow me to end this by nuking Cortex's space station with all the gems I collected, thanks to Embryo and his super laser. Yeah, Embryo had a falling out with Cortex and wanted Crash to help him stop Cortex with gem power. Take it away, Crash. Where have I seen a gem-powered laser before? Oh god, that's awful. And these two came out the same year too.